Hey guys, what's going on? Veil Decay here, bringing another video for you guys today. How you doing? How you been? Hope everything's going real good for you guys. In today's video, I'll be going over Mage race selection in Wrath Classic, in which I'll be talking about the different racials and how they affect PvE and PvP, and telling you in my opinion which are the best at the end of the video. That being said, let's get to it, and thanks for watching. Alright guys, we're going to get this thing rolling, so let's start with the Alliance, and we're going to start with Human. Humans probably have the most racial abilities to offer in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, so we're just going to start at the top and go from there. First up, we have Perception, which increases your stealth detection ability, meaning you can see rogues and druids before they open up on you, preventing a lot of damage and possibly a one-shot. Next up, we have Human Spirit, which increases your spirit by 3%. This is beneficial because Molten Armor uses 35% of your spirit and converts that into crit rating. So the more spirit you have, the more crit you'll get from Molten Armor. Next up, we have Diplomacy, which is 10% rep gains, meaning the beginning of expansion rep grinds that you have to do will go by a lot faster. Next, we have Increased Expertise with Swords and Maces. This doesn't benefit us very much because we're a caster class, not a melee class. So lastly, we have Will to Survive, which is pretty much a free CC break. It's a PvP trinket for free, meaning that we can equip a second PvE trinket and do a lot more damage in PvP situations. That's going to do it for humans. Now let's go ahead and move on to gnomes. Alright, so for gnomes, we're going to start with Escape Artist. Escape Artist gets you out of roots and snares. This is really good in PvP situations, can help a lot from getting away from melee. Next up, we have Expansive Mind, which increases your intellect by 5%. That's good for mages, considering we use mana. The more mana we have, the more damage we can do, and the more crit we will receive from that intellect. Next up, we have Resistance to Arcane Damage. So that's 2% resist on Arcane, which can be beneficial to help you prevent getting polymorphed or something like that in PvP. And lastly, we have Engineering Skill Increased, which has no benefit to us at all gameplay wise. So that's going to do it for gnomes. We're going to go ahead and talk about Draenei. Lastly, we're going to talk about Draenei, which were added in the Burning Crusade as the final race that can be a mage on the Alliance. So first up, they have Jewel Crafting Skill Increase, which has no gameplay value, so we'll just go ahead and move to the next one, which is Gift of the Naru. Gift of the Naru is a heal over time effect. It's not that big of a heal, but you can use it and then go into Ice Block, get a couple of ticks off, and come out with more health than you went in with. Next, we have Heroic Presence, which gives your party 1% hit rating. This is really nice in PvE situations for like dungeons and raids. Just makes it easier on everybody to have less hit. Lastly, you have 2% shadow resistance, which is really good against warlocks and shadow priests in PvP situations. Alright, that's going to do it for the Alliance side of mages. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the Horde. Alright, so first up for the Horde, we have the Undead, which has Will of the Forsaken. Will of the Forsaken can remove fear, sleep, and charm abilities, making it a very strong PvP ability. Next, you have the ability to consume a corpse to regain some health. Next is Underwater Breathing, which has no real gameplay value. And lastly, they have 2% shadow damage resistance, which can be useful against warlocks and shadow priests. That's going to do it for the Undead. Let's go ahead and move on to Troll. Next up, we have Trolls. Trolls have Berserking, which is a Bloodlust type effect as a racial, making it very strong in PvE situations. Next, we have Regeneration Increased, which increases your regen by a certain amount, just meaning you regen a little faster than other races. Damage Increased versus Beasts can be beneficial in leveling and possible PvE situations. Then Increased Crit Chance with throwing weapons and bows doesn't really affect us at all because we're mages. We don't use bows or throwing weapons. Lastly, you have reduced duration of movement, reducing effects. So these are like slows. You have less time that you're in slows, which is nice in PvP situations. It's gonna do it for trolls. Let's go ahead and move on to the last one, which is Blood Elves. All right, so last but not least, we're gonna talk about the new kids on the block for the Horde, and that's Blood Elves. So for Blood Elves, your enchanting skill is increased, which has no gameplay value, so it doesn't matter. And then you have May Silence nearby opponents. That's Arcane Torrent. It's an AoE silence, which is very strong for PvP and PvE situations. Lastly, you have resistance to magical damage. So you have a flat 2% resistance to all magic, making you very, very strong against any kind of magic. All right, that does it for Blood Elves. So now it's time to talk about which ones are best in PvE and PvP situations. All right, so the way I'm gonna do these rankings is I'm gonna go from third up to first and tell you why I think each one of those deserves that place. So we're gonna start with PvE first, and we're gonna start with the Alliance. So realistically, all three of them are very close to one another. So close that there's really not a definitive answer. But I'm gonna give you my 3, 2, 1. And that is third is gonna be Human. Just because they only have the rep increase. The CC break doesn't really help in PvE situations, and the 3% spirit is only a slight increase on your crit rating compared to, say, my second place choice, which is Gnome with their expansive mind. 5% intel is pretty significant. It's, more mana, which means more abilities you can do, and it gives you more crit. And then first place for PvE situations, I'm gonna give it to Draenei, just for the simple fact that they give a party-wide buff that increases everybody's hit by 1%. Like I said, all three of these are very close, but this is my personal opinion. So now let's talk about the Horde side for PvE. For Horde PvE side, my third place is going to be Undead, just because really the only thing they bring to the table is Will of the Forsaken, and Will of the Forsaken's really only strong in PvP situations. So that ends, that puts them at the number 3 spot for me. My second place spot is going to be Blood Elf, just because Blood Elves have Arcane Torrent, which can kind of be a little bit of utility to help get mana back and to have a AoE silence. My first and my number 1 spot is going to be Troll for Horde, just because Berserking is too good to pass up. It's, it's a mini Bloodlust. Being able to constantly cast out those quick casts is going to increase your damage significantly. That is my order for Horde. So now let's talk about the PvP side of things. So we're going to start again with the Alliance. In that third place spot for Alliance, I'm going to say it's Draenei, just because they have nothing really beneficial for PvP. And their big thing they bring is 1% hit, which doesn't really matter in PvP because you don't need that much hit anyway. And like I said before, their heal is very small with Gift of the Naru, so that lands them in the third place spot for PvP. Second place for PvP is going to be Gnome, just because you have Escape Artist. It helps you get out of those roots and snares, so it gives you a little bit of a benefit and an edge. And of course, the 5% intel that you get for being a Gnome is also useful in PvP, along with that little bit of crit. The big dog, the top dog for Alliance is going to be Human, just because the free PvP trinket and Perception together make for a very powerful combo, and it makes it to where you can do a lot of damage in PvP. So of course, humans are going to be the #1 spot for Alliance on PvP. For the Horde side PvP, my 3rd place is going to be Troll. Trolls don't really have anything beneficial for PvP. I mean, they have the movement reduction, but that's not enough to justify them being higher on the list. You know, your bloodlust, your berserk that you have as a troll is nice if you can sit there and cast, but how often are you just going to be able to sit there and cast in PvP? Not very often. My 2nd place is going to Blood Elf. Arcane Torrent gives you mana back, as well as an AoE silence. It's pretty big, especially in PvP. Now, 1st place for Horde is of course going to go to Undead with Will of the Forsaken. Will of the Forsaken is very strong. It's almost as good as Will to Survive for humans, except that it can only take Fear, Charm, and Sleep away. But it gives you that, and you also have your trinket. So that's why Undead are on the top of the list for PvP for the Horde side. So there again, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Remember, these are only my opinion. You know, you don't have to take it as fact. You can play whatever you want, but if you want to min max, this is probably the route you want to take. And hopefully you got all the information you need for your adventures in Wrath Classic coming up pretty soon. With that being said, guys, I'll catch you all in the next video. Much love. Peace.